born in Tupelo, February 8th, 1942.
Who were your parents?
Irma and Joe Wilkins.
And when did you come to New Albany?
Came to New Albany after World War II. My dad had been overseas and got back in 1946. We lived with my aunt and uncle in Tupelo, and my dad had worked for the Department of Agriculture before the war and resumed his employment with the Department of Agriculture and came to New Albany working for the Soil Conservation Service.
Mhm.
So that was in 1946.
And you were just, what, 4?
4.
Okay. You have any siblings?
I do not.
So you might as well say you grew up in New Albany then,
I
didn't
did.
you? When did you start playing sports?
Well, we lived on Garfield Street, and it was next to the Matty Thompson School, and they had a nice schoolyard down there. So we would congregate down there and choose sides. So it was a neighborhood organization.
Well, who were some of the other children that came to that congregation?
Well, Joanne Morris is from here, and he was there. There were a lot of older boys that took us in. The Quarles boys lived on North Street. Billy Charles Horton lived above me. Bobby Joe Giles lived above me. The Craigs lived nearby. Just a good group of young men, and that included us. You know, they're younger.
Yeah. So it was kind of Mayberry-ish here.
Definitely Mayberry.
Well, could you share your memories of what I understand was the first Little League team, the Midgets?
Yes. I don't know what caused us to get organized, unless it was Johnny White, the coach. We must not have had any organized baseball other than what we did ourselves. But we played over at the high school, the Albany High School, which had the only playing field nearby, the regular baseball playing field. And the word just went out, and enough.
How did the word go out?
Probably at the swimming pool.
Yeah.
Everybody knew about the swimming pool or the movie theater, you know, where we'd see each other, or Sunday school or whatever. But we had a pretty good little group, you know, that wanted to play, and evidently it took place elsewhere, Ripley and Fulton, Pontotoc, nearby locations, you know, that wanted to play. So that was the genesis of it.
So when y'all would play a team like Fulton or Ripley, how'd you get there?
Parents would drive different cars,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the way we do it, convoy style.
And you had a uniform, right?
We did. I don't remember how that came about, but I know the high school uniform, different businesses would donate the uniform. I, among others, wore Stag's hamburgers for many years.
Do you remember when, Stag, you went there to eat too, right?
Actually, I worked there too. Yeah, the Stags, I knew them and the family, and that was kind of an institution here, you know, Stags, and I worked some during the lunch hour in high school, and on Saturdays for, 10 to 2 maybe.
So you worked at Stag's?
I did, yeah.
And they had a secret recipe?
They had a secret recipe, and I made a lot of money there, 50 cents an hour.
Yeah. Well, they sold a lot of hamburgers, didn't they?
They did. They did. Never took an order. We just did it from memory. And where else could you get a hamburger for 15 cents and a Coke for a dime and walk out with lunch for 25 cents?
So how old were you when you were working there?
I must have been in the 10th grade, started in 10th and worked through high school. We would hitchhike from high school down to Staggs and eat whatever we could and then wait on the customers and then get back probably 1:30, in time for the second class.
So, okay. I thought you were thinking you did it just in the summer, but you did it during lunch hour at school.
Yes. And we listened to the football game that had been played on Friday night. On Saturday, they had a radio there for us that were playing, so we could listen to the ball game as we waited on customers.
So what ball game was that?
It was a football game.
Okay.
And
It was a New Albany football game?
the Army football game, so that we had played in, and sometimes it was fun to listen, and sometimes it was not.
Well, going back to your younger years when you were in the midgets, did you play a particular position or?
I played pitcher.
Okay.
I was pitcher.
So I guess you had a fastball, huh?
If I just got it over the plate in the strike zone, I was happy. I don't think I had a curve. It was just a pitch.
Well, at that time of your life and that of your friends, were y'all listening to the St. Louis Cardinals or who were y'all listening to?
Well, the Cardinals was the big team then, and it seems like everybody tuned them in if they did. You knew the big names like Stan Musial, but I was not a regular listener.
Well, at that time, do you recall if there was a semi-pro baseball team in town?
Yes, they had one that played out at the fairgrounds, and they came from all over, and that lasted, I think, in the early 50s. I remember that happening, but then I guess it just stopped, went out.
What about other adult sporting things that were going on as you were growing up here?
Well, the adult, the one I remember is Eric Snipes.
Mm-hmm.
He was the umpire and knew everything about the game, and his word was the final word, and that was just forever. It's always Eric Snipes.
Who was your coach in high school?
Let's see, Bill Ferris was the baseball coach. I think he had played college ball. I'm not sure where he attended college, but he was, that was his specialty, was baseball. And he coached us in football too. We didn't win many games, but we didn't have many players, but we had an enjoyable time, I guess you could say.
Well, who were some of your friends who were playing with you?
Well, everybody, I mean, we had to have just about everybody that we could get because we had so few, but Bill Rutledge was on the team. Johnny Carnell was on the team. Roy Bell was a year ahead of us. Harry Carthop, Herbert Richardson, Jimmy Clinton was an interesting story. Jimmy had never played high school football. In our senior year, we needed a quarterback. We were just short of personnel. So we went to Jimmy and asked him to play, and he started quarterback that year and did an excellent job, and I think he enjoyed it, It was just one of those things where we had to pull people out, and it
Right
worked.
place at the right time.
Yeah. Phil Morris was on the team. Phil was excellent player.
So your position on the football team was what?
Well, it was a lot because of the lack of number, but my senior year I played tailback on offense, and I kicked off, and I punted, and I received the kickoffs. And on defense, I played linebacker.
You never rested, did you?
I never came out.
Oh, when you were growing up in this community, how did the community support sports?
Well, you would get queried pretty good when you went to the barber shop. They would ask you, they were pretty thorough on going over who you go play and what was going on at the barber shop. Guy Martin was one of the barbers, and he was a good questioner. Different people would stop you on the street, you know, and say a comment to you that I didn't know you could run like that, or who you playing this week, you know. It was not a lot said, but you know, enough.
So there was a lot of community support.
Oh yes, it was always a good turnout at the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people there, and the football field was where the part of the baseball field was. The outfield for the football, the outfield for baseball was the football field. So cars could pull up on the baseball side over there and get out and watch the game. And I guess we had some bleachers over there for the opposing team, but nothing special.
And you said that a lot of the businesses bought uniforms, is that right?
Yes, they donated the money to purchase the uniform. It seemed like they were some wool something, and of course the breeches just went down below the knees, and you wore the long socks. And if you wanted to buy your baseball gear, a lot of us went to York Arms in Memphis to buy it. It was on South Main Street, just a wonderful store to look around, but you could get a pitching toe there and get a nice glove, good selection of gloves, and that's all you needed to play baseball.
Yeah, that's right. Well, now, I read the story when you were when you were a midget baseball player here. I think it was Ripley that said that you probably were too old to be playing because you were bigger than other kids.
Yeah.
And your mama had to come down
Yeah.
and tell them.
I vaguely remember that. I'm sure I just stepped aside while all the controversy and discussions went on, but Mother came down out of the stands and talked to Fay Reed, who was and continued to be a real force in Tippah County in sports, but evidently she convinced him that I was no older than 10 years or whatever I was supposed to be, and so we went forward and played the game. That was a special place to play in Ripley because their baseball field was at the fairgrounds and they had some nice stands there. It was, you felt big time playing in Ripley, so it was fun.
Well, Fay Reed probably had a hand in that. He was pretty instrumental in a lot of
He was.
organizing.
As a matter of fact, after I graduated from undergraduate school and I was in law school, I would officiate high school games, and he was the head of the officials. So, of course, I had forgotten about the incident, years ago. But I reunited with Fay Reed, as an official.
Yeah. Let's go back to your senior year in high school, and talk about your scholarship offer.
I think the only reason I got a scholarship offer was because of Frank Kennard playing on the Oxford team. I don't know if we won any games my junior year, but you know, the Little 10 included Oxford, so we always played them. And my senior year, we played in New Albany, and Coach Kennard's son was Frank, so he came to see Frank play, and Buster Poole was the Ole Miss line coach, and this was his area of recruiting. And I just had my best game against Oxford, and I didn't know I was being recruited until someone told me that the baseball coach had been over here to, that's Coach Swayze, to talk to the administration about me, see if I was a good student, if I behaved, and things like that. And they told me that Coach Swayze had been asking about you. Then they started recruiting me. And the times I'd been to Oxford on the football field, the varsity, the Ole Miss football field, was with the band. I was in the band too. So
You were that student that had to go get your band uniform on it during halftime.
well, they didn't make me do that. They didn't make me do that. But anyway, I had a good game against Oxford, and they started recruiting me, and it was fun because they would offer me a sideline pass, so I would get to go over there and look at the game and see the players. And I never envisioned playing college football, but I got out there on the field with them, and I said, well, you know, they're not any bigger than I am. I think I might could do this. And then Ole Miss was playing Tennessee in Memphis. We always played at Crump Stadium up there, the Tennessee game. And it was cold, but it was a wonderful game, and that kind of sealed it with me. The difficulty was with my dad, because he was a big Mississippi State alumni, and my grandfather had gone to Mississippi State, and one of my uncles had gone to Mississippi State, so it was just kind of understood that I would go to Mississippi State. But I'll have to say, they never gave up on talking to my dad. And finally in February, after the signing day had started, I guess in January, they called Dad and talked to him that they were holding a scholarship for me, and somehow I thought it was worth at least $5,000, you know, and I thought that was a lot of money in those days. You know, a yearly scholarship with tuition and food and place to stay, board. So I told Dad, I said, look, you know, this is crazy. Mississippi State's not recruiting me. I think we need to do this. So he said, all right, go ahead and call them and tell them we'll be over there Saturday. And Daddy we all were bird hunters and had bird dogs. So he said, we'll go bird hunting after we sign on Saturday. So I went over there in my hunting clothes and signed, and we hunted the rest of the day in Lafayette County.
Well, I guess, did you have a good hunt that day?
Had a good hunt.
It was a good day all the way around, wasn't it?
Feeling well.
Yeah.
You know, it was interesting in that I knew one person on recruit. Frank Kennard was the only other person I knew, but you know, I got to make long time friendships.
Who were some of the other people on that team that year?
Okay, well, the big recruit, I would say, for that year was Pierre Dunn from Natchez. He was a quarterback and big and strong. Buck Randall was a fullback linebacker from Greenwood, and 4 players came from Greenwood: Buck Randall, Bo Aldridge, James Thaxton, and Ralph Smith. And Bill Summerall from Laurel, Bobby Robinson from Macomb, just primarily from Mississippi, but other players from other states, from Tennessee and Kentucky, came. But some transferred out, after the freshman year, who I thought were excellent players, but homesick, girlfriends or whatever, they left, and the group grew smaller, and I happened to hang in there.
Yeah. Did you play there at the same time as Jimmy Weatherly?
I did. I was a year ahead of Jimmy, and we played him in high school, and just a rough and tumble game. The coach in Pontotoc was James Butler, and he'd been an assistant coach in New Albany my sophomore year, and I got hurt playing my sophomore year, so I didn't play. But then he was hired in Pontotoc the next year and did an excellent job coaching down there. So my senior year, we played Jimmy Weatherly and Ray Bedingfield, both of whom signed with Ole Miss, and just became good friends and carried forward.
So you're still friends with them? You
Well,
still see the players?
Ray is still living. Ray lives in Tennessee. They're in Georgia. Jimmy Weatherly died last year, I think. So the numbers are dwindling.
That's the truth. So, looking back over your sports life, and what did sports contribute to your life?
Well, lifelong friends, of course, but I felt that that the scholarship and everything made it easier on Mother and Daddy. I know Daddy thought he could support me going to college, but I really felt that it would be beneficial for them to do it, and I think Daddy did enjoy it. I mean, two bowl games. We played in the Sugar Bowl.
Talk about that for your Sugar Bowl experience.
Oh, well, the first time was in '63, following the '62 season, which the '62 team, was the only undefeated, untied team at Ole Miss, and we put the Walker champions up, our team did. But '62, we played Arkansas in the Sugar Bowl, and Arkansas was the Southwest champions. And we had played Arkansas in other years before I played, always in Memphis, and then we started playing them in Jackson some. But Billy Moore was their quarterback, and they had an excellent team. Ken Hatfield went on to play pro ball, was the halfback, and I had known Ken and Dick Hatfield because we were Sigma Chi's. I was Sigma Chi at Ole Miss, and they were Sigma Chi's at Arkansas, and we met at the Tri-State gathering of Sigma Chi's. So I knew them before the game, but it was just a hard-fought game, and I think the deciding factor in that was Billy Moore, their outstanding quarterback, who I'm sure was all Southwest Conference, tried to do a sweep, and Buck Randall came up from his defensive position and just knocked him out of bounds and put him out of the game. And that took the wind out of Arkansas, and we won that game. Then the next year, we played Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, and Joe Namath had been the quarterback, but he got suspended for some infraction by Bear Bryant. And I never heard what he had done or not done, but Steve Sloan was the quarterback, and it was unusual in that year because it had snowed in New Orleans, and they made a big deal of us flying down there and landing, but all the snow had been pushed off the runways, and on the football field, the snow was pushed off of the field, but it was banked up on the side, so it was cool and crisp. The sun was shining for the game, but it was noticeably crisp outside. But for some reason, the footballs that we had were slick, and I don't know. I couldn't explain why, but it was just hard to hold. You know that you'd fumble or you miss the pass. So we had something called stickum that you could put on your fingers, and you had to use your knuckles because if you got grass on there, it didn't do any good. So we had to do that to catch a ball. We got right down there to score, and somebody fumbled the ball, and right on the goal line, and Alabama held it. We were not able to score the second time. The game ended, they kicked 4 field goals, 12-7. And, but that was a real experience. The reception and everything before the game was at the Roosevelt Hotel, and got to meet Coach Bryant and see all the other players. So it was special. And of course, Mother and Daddy enjoyed going down there to that. And Mother had a great uncle who lived in Pass Christian, and they would drive over and spend the night with him after the game.
Did people from New Albany come to watch you play?
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
I'm sure they did. It was Ole Miss had always had a good following, and of course, New Orleans was New Orleans, and it was fun. I went down to this men's store just down from the hotel. I bought me a pretty green sport coat, and I wore it out.
So do you have children?
I do have 3 children.
Are any of your children, do they play sports?
Well, I've got, because they're all grown now, I've got one granddaughter, and she just turned 13, and she's not into sports yet. And then I've got a grandson who's 2 years, but he's built to be a sports player. So he's a big boy. Yeah. So we hope I can live long enough to see that.
Yeah. So, what's one of the best memories you have about living in New Albany?
What not to like, I think the inclusiveness, friendliness, like swimming pool was on the other side of town. I could ride my bike to the swimming pool, cross Highway 78, which was, believe it or not, came through town, with all the trucks and traffic. Get back home, no big deal. Go to the movies on Saturday, no big deal, not expensive. Ecumenical is what I would call it, because at Christmas, different groups would contribute food to the needy, and I know I was a Methodist. We came down there and worked, packed the boxes, took them to homes. The Christmas parade. The Catholic Church needed a Joseph, so they asked me to be the Joseph on the float.
Yeah. So you graduated here in 1960,
1960.
Right? And then you graduated at Ole Miss in what year?
In 64, and then my last year, the way they did it in football is you could be redshirted. So after my freshman year, I was redshirted in 1961, but academically, was a sophomore. So my senior year in football in 64, I started law school.
So you were at Ole Miss during all the James Meredith riots?
I was there in 62. I had broken my collarbone before the first game, Memphis State was always our first game, and I had what they call a figure eight cast on that kept me from doing like that. And I believe I'd been to Jackson to a ball game, and I heard that something was going on at the Lyceum. So I walked over to the Lyceum, and it was ringed by federal marshals. And I was standing over by a magnolia tree right on the sidewalk. And obviously I was not doing anything except looking. And I think somebody threw something. And the marshal said, let them have it. And because they had on the helmets, the vest, and tear gas guns. And this marshal looked like he shot right at me. He didn't hit me, but I took off and ran up the steps of Peabody, which was right next to it, ran down to the basement and out the back and over to Miller Hall. That was the dormitory for the athletes. And Coach Davidson was in charge of Miller Hall. He was a freshman coach, and he told us to put wet towels at the door to keep the tear gas out and to stay in your rooms, and that's what we did.
All the athletes did that.
We did that. Now, there's some talk that they called for Buck Randall over there to come over there and speak to the rioters to try to stop them. I don't know if that's true or not. I never heard Buck talk about it. I don't know if that really happened. That might just be something that somebody made up.
Yeah, that was a time to live through, wasn't it?
It was. But that was the 62 team that went undefeated. So it was interesting in that after I got over my broken collarbone, I started playing, and the 101st Airborne was on campus, and they had tents set up everywhere, especially on the practice field above our routine practice field. And the day we were, after the game, we were going to start practicing. Coach Vault told Don Estes, who was a manager, to go out there and tell the military that we were getting ready to practice to get off the field. So Don said he went out there and looked for somebody that looked like he had a lot of insignia on his collar to give him the message, and that's what he did. And the 101st left the practice field. We had a big embankment up there that they could sit on, and then watch us practice and never uttered a word, never said anything, never clapped anything. So they, I'm sure, were told not to interfere with practice, and we just went about our business. And you could go around campus. They patrolled the campus at night in their Jeeps, MPs or whomever, and just went about our business.
Wow. So, living through that time as an athlete, you were pretty isolated from the craziness that was going on elsewhere in the campus.
Well, it didn't go on that long, see, because the 101st Airborne was on campus. They not in groups, but the marshals were, or the FBI or whomever, and there was a presence on campus.
Yeah.
And Meredith was always escorted to class or wherever he went. So, there was no cat calling that I heard, shouting or throwing or anything like that.
But
so,
you did see him.
Oh, I saw him often, yes. Yeah, and I've seen him in Jackson. He lives in Jackson, and very supportive of the university. Yeah.
So after you left Ole Miss and you finished law school there, is that correct?
I finished law school in January '67. I did.
And so you never lived in New Albany? again?
I did. After the military service, I was married then, and I had to find a job when I got out of the military. And I inquired with the National Labor Relations Board and with the Internal Revenue Service. I knew they had estate tax attorneys, and I thought I would like that. So I applied, and they had a opening in Des Moines, Iowa, and in Birmingham, Alabama. And I was stationed at Fort McClellan, Alabama, which is in Anniston, probably less than 100 miles away. So I said, IRS. So they asked me over for an interview, and of course I had on my uniform. They let me off to go there to interview. And who should talk to me and interview me? None other than a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserves. So little was said about, my school and everything, and he wanted to hear about Vietnam. So I got the job, just like that. And wonderful experience with the IRS. And I stayed with them a little over 2 years. My dad had died, and we decided to come back and help Mother. And I did. Came back in probably 74.
Well, let's rewind to the, were you drafted or?
No, I was ROTC.
ROTC?
ROTC. That was pretty routine. My dad had been ROTC at State, and it benefited him in World War II. And so it was just understood that I would be a ROTC. And so I was deferred, of course, while I was in law school. And I was commissioned in the infantry. And as I watched the news in Vietnam, I decided to change my branch of service. So I transferred to the military intelligence. And I got my orders in December to report to Fort Benning in April.
And what year was that?
Fort Benning, Georgia, in 1967. And so I went to Fort Benning, logged there, and I went to the intelligence school and shipped out to Vietnam in August of 1967. The Army has a way of speeding up things when they need to. And they, 6 days a week, we were in infantry school, and then to intelligence school at Fort Holabird, Maryland, and then to Vietnam.
Where in Vietnam?
Saigon would be the area where I ended up being stationed. Tan Son Nhut Air Base was right outside of Saigon, and I was fortunately assigned to the Combined Intelligence Center there in Tan Son Nhut.
How long were you there?
A year. That was during the period, though, the Tet Offensive occurred, so that was in end of January of 1968 that happened.
When you came back from from Vietnam,
I was fortunate to be stationed at Fort Fort McClellan, Alabama, which is in Anniston, and it's a small base. They had the wax school there, they had the chemical school there, and I was assigned as a intelligence instructor to the chemical school, which was just obviously very basic intelligence, but to inform the chemical candidates and that what we did and how it worked.
when you were in Vietnam and the Tet offensive was going on, what were you aware of all of that was happening, or when you look back, you really didn't know the scope of that?
When I look back and say, here I am, an intelligence officer, and didn't have the faintest idea that anything like that was going to happen. I've read some of the ranking officers who have written about it, and that they had had some inkling that something might happen, but routinely every year, the Lunar New Year was their New Year, and the Vietnamese soldiers would get leave to go home for a week, because it was a week long, and in the years past, nothing happened during that period of time. It was just kind of a easy time. Well, that's when the Vietnamese, the VC attacked all of the provincial cities, and we were not prepared. In my little BOQ, which was away from Tan Son Nhut, we had 3 weapons in the BOQ, and there's three floors of officers in that BOQ, and I had 1 weapon, and 2 other guys had weapons that we had to turn in so different ones could perform guard duty. The Vietnamese guard had run off when the offensive started, so we didn't have anybody guarding us, and it's interesting that the weapon I had was an illegal weapon. I had to go to the embassy a lot and carry top secret papers, and I couldn't get company or battalion to give me a sidearm. So I wrote home and told Daddy what had happened, and the next thing I knew, I got a little box from Daddy. It was a .38 special pistol with no ammunition, but a perfect size that I could wear under my uniform, because the blouse, hung on the outside. I could put it on my belt. So I said, who has .38 ammunition? The MPs at the air base did. So I got our Jeep, and I drove over there to the checkpoint to go in Tan Son Nhut, and went up to the MP and said, I need some ammunition for a .38 pistol that my daddy had sent me. He said, how many boxes do you want? So I got 2 boxes of ammunition and went downtown and bought a holster on the black market, and I could put it on underneath my blouse. Never had to check it to go in the officers club or anything, so it was nice, but I had to give it up. Then after a couple of days with not doing anything other than that, the military brought us 3 shotguns and 2 machine guns. So I had to show the rest of the BOQ how to use a pump shotgun, because being from the South, I knew how to lock and load and shoot a pump shotgun.
All that bird hunting information came.
Definitely. So I did, I gave out 2 shotguns, and I kept 1 for myself until they made me turn it in, and I hated to turn it in, but I eventually got my pistol back and brought it home, and I was worried about that pistol because you're not supposed to have any private firearms over there. And when I came back on the plane, I had it in my carry-on bag, and went through customs there in San Francisco where we landed, and they were asking me all these questions. I said, well, look, I've got my pistol that I had in Vietnam. It's unloaded. And the guy said, welcome home, son.
What a story. Well, I didn't know we were going to go to Vietnam today.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.